Welcome to Bitcoin and Me, Molly Spiers. Great to have you with me.
Hi, Gary. Thanks for having me.
For anyone that doesn't know, if you've been living under a rock in the UK, in the Bitcoin world for a long time, Molly is the Chief Marketing Officer of Coincorner and more recently BHodl, and also is the very strong podcast host of the Bitcoiners podcast with a whole load of degenerate men that you've got to try and keep under control. So, yeah, it's great to have you on, Molly. Thanks for being a guest.
Thank you.
The first question I ask all my guests is, what's your earliest memories of money as a child?
Wow, that's a really good question. The first thing that comes to mind, I guess, is getting pocket money as a kid for doing chores. And from that, appreciating the value of money. One story actually that I do have is that when I must have been about 13, and I got my first job, which was basically just washing dishes in a restaurant here on the Isle of Man. And I worked there I must have been there 5 or 6 years in total. But when I first started there, you're on minimum wage, you don't get a lot for washing dishes. But on the Isle of Man, you can learn to drive when you're 16. So that was, for me, something that I really wanted to do. And it was the time when the BMW Mini Coopers, when they first had their rebrand and they came out. And I saw, we went to like a like a local fair type thing where they had them. And I still remember saying to my mum and dad at the time, like, oh, I would love one of those when I'm 16 and I can drive. My mum and dad were like, well, if you've got a job, you start saving, you'll eventually get there. So yeah, from the age of 13 to 16, so 3 years, I worked weekends, I worked evenings, I worked as much as I legally could. And yeah, I ended up saving up enough money in cash in a little drawer that I had in my bedroom. There was about $5,000 in there in the end. And that for me is one of like my core memories of money and appreciating the value of it, because I worked so hard throughout those years to get to that point. And yeah, in the end, I ended up getting a Mini for my first car, which was great.
Nice. So did you feel like you were going without other things to kind of sacrifice for that because you had such a clear goal in mind, or was it just, you'd still like buy a whatever 13 to 16-year-old girls buy these days, or were you like steadfast? No, I'm not going to buy these new trendy tops or whatever. I'm going to I'm not going to buy CDs. I'm going to just save everything to get my Mini.
Yeah, I was very just focused on that was the goal. That's kind of like my personality as a whole. It's like if I've got a goal, that's blinkers on, that's what I'm going for. So yeah, there was a lot of stuff I think I went without during those years, but in the grand scheme of things, when you've got something as big as that you want to aim for, yeah, it's the sacrifices that you make.
And presumably at that age, you hadn't really been exposed to or challenged yourself as to what kind of money was or what it really meant as such. It was just a means to an end, because you said you just put all that cash in a drawer.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm not going to take the giant leap now to Bitcoin, but presumably there was some kind of financial education journey you went on through the next 10, 15 years to realize that actually having cash in a drawer is probably not the best way to save for the future. So how did your kind of late teen, early 20 years evolve through, education, career, and starting to understand a bit more about money?
Yeah. So after when I was 16, I finished school, went to college, which I did art and design there. And then after college, I went to university where I did fashion management with marketing. You wouldn't know it to look at me half the time because I just wear leggings and baggy top. But so I did 3 years at uni, and I think during those times the stereotype of being a poor student. I worked in the co-op. For anybody who doesn't live in the UK, it's just like a small supermarket style convenience store. So I worked in there while I was at uni. Again, it's all minimum wage stuff, but those are the things that really teach you the importance and the value of money, because you're living on the bare minimum. You can't have nice things, and there's the concept that when you are sort of at uni, when you first come out of uni, yeah, you do work for minimum wage. You're at the start of your career, essentially. So those couple of years, I think money was an important focus. I mean, you're literally living paycheck to paycheck because that's all you're working for. So I came out of uni, and then my first job was actually marketing for a local hotel chain that we have over here. So I was there a year and a half, and I loved it. It was great fun. Marketing was my passion, but it was quite limited in the sense that it is a local hotel chain. So the career progression wasn't great. And then, so this was 2000, the beginning of 2014. And then I, obviously was looking around, seeing what other jobs were out there. And there was a job with Coincorner, which had just started. Coincorner was founded in 2014, and they were looking for a marketing person to come and join the startup. And it sounded really fun. It was everything I could do. So I inquired about it. I had no idea what Bitcoin was, never heard of it. I mean, it's 2014, 2015 time. It's the information that we have now just wasn't available. It was just very limited. So, when you're trying to prep for a job interview, it was it was really hard. So yeah, I went along. The guys had me in for an interview. And that was kind of my first exposure, shall we say, to Bitcoin, and you're trying to understand what it was, what was this new type of currency, type of money that they were working on. And it sounded really interesting. Like I said, they were sort of founded in 2014, so very fresh, very new startup company. Ultimately, they offered me the job, but I didn't actually join them until April in 2015 because of, they were startups, so trying to secure funding and stuff like that. So I joined them about 9 months in. But during that time, it really gave me the time to kind of try and understand Bitcoin, learn about it, figure out what on earth it was, because like I said, there just wasn't the information out there. There was no one to really ask except the guys who were working on it, Danny. And it just kind of opened my eyes. And then as I've gone on throughout the years, I've been at Coincorner. This is my 11th year. Yeah, I've really learned to look differently at money and the financial system and the way that works. I just think that if I hadn't have joined Coincorner, I would just be oblivious still to all the issues the financial system has. And I'd just be going around like 99% of the population are, with the kind of eyes closed and not knowing what's really going on.
So you applied for that job in the first place, not because you were even interested in what Bitcoin was. Is that fair? It was just more a case like, this is some startup. That might be quite interesting. I don't know, the salary looks more than what I'm on now, might have more progression, or the usual things that most people, as they are relatively early in their career and looking to move on to other opportunities. You could have gone to work for a car showroom, and you could get vaguely interested in what cars are, but if you're doing marketing, you don't have to know every little finite detail about a car and the mechanics and engines and all the rest of it. But was there something about either what Danny and the team wanted and expected from you in what that role would involve, or just the kind of sort of person you are and wanting to do the best in a job that needed to have that information? What was it sort of spurred you to really understanding more about what Bitcoin was as you joined the business?
Yeah, I had applied for other jobs. The Isle of Man at the time was big for e-gaming and stuff like that, and it's those are big industries. But I think what it was about Bitcoin, it was the excitement. I think that certainly Danny and the rest of the guys talked about the potential. The fact that it was 11 years ago, still very unheard of, and really just didn't know where it was going to go. When I joined Coincorner as well, I had a 6-month contract because it was kind of like, well, we don't know if it's going to work or not. I think thankfully it has, and I'm here 11 years later, but there was just a lot of uncertainty. But I also felt sort of like at the age that I was, which was kind of, relatively fresh out of uni, kind of like a year's marketing under my belt, no real responsibilities at that time. I felt like that was an opportunity that I could take. And, if things didn't work out, or if Bitcoin didn't, if Bitcoin didn't work out, then it was kind of okay because you hadn't sacrificed too much at that point. But yeah, it's wild when I think about it, because I remember my first Bitcoin purchase, like Danny showing me how to buy Bitcoin through the exchange. And I bought, I don't know, 10 quid's worth. It wasn't a lot, but I'm pretty sure the price of Bitcoin was like $344 at the time. So till and at the time I thought that was a lot. Like I said, fresh out of uni, you have no money, you're kind of saving for the big things in life, houses and whatever. So you sit there and in hindsight you're like, oh, $300, if only I'd bought like a full coin then or whatever. But it's hindsight. It's Nobody knew that Bitcoin would be where it is now, like back then.
No. And before you joined, were sort of friends and family, what was their take on this when you said, oh, I'm going to, because you may have even said, oh, I'm going to join a crypto company or whatever, because again, at the time, we're in a very different place now where Bitcoin and crypto are so intrinsically separated. But although I guess, to be fair, back then, other crypto wasn't really about that much anyway, was it? So, I mean, it was...
No.
we went through that whole crypto altcoin phase, but did family and friends say you were crazy? Or again, is it you're young, go for it, you're not screwing up your future if this doesn't work out?
Yeah, a bit of both. I mean, I remember telling like my family, my friends, that's what I was going to do. And people were like, what is it? And I was just like, I
I
can't
don't
really
know.
tell. Yeah, exactly. I don't know. I was like, I know obviously the you end up reciting the decentralized cryptocurrency, blah, blah, blah. But to other people, that means nothing. Even today, people, if you say stuff like that, you lose people. So it was more of a case of, yeah, hey guys, this is what I'm going to do. And everyone's like, okay, good luck. But then can't ask the questions because they don't know what it is. They don't understand it. And I just didn't really have the answers at the time. But yeah, I mean, it worked out great. So I don't regret it at all.
So as someone that's been not just involved and interested in Bitcoin, but actually working in a Bitcoin business, I mean, there can't be that many people in the UK that have worked in a Bitcoin business for 11 years. I can't imagine. Hadn't really thought about that until we had this conversation, but it must be kind of a handful of people pretty much, because
Yeah.
Bitcoin's not been around for that long, and Bitcoin businesses even less so. Even now, there's not that many Bitcoin businesses in the UK. But where have you seen the biggest changes in the last 10, 15 years?
I mean, there's been a lot of changes. I think probably the most impactful ones, the ones that impact me the most are obviously marketing. But, we've seen regulatory changes, we've seen banking changes. All those sorts of things have affected Coincorner as well. I know Danny's spoken publicly about it before. Initially we had to bank with like Eastern European banks because UK banks wouldn't bank Bitcoin businesses. So certainly for the first couple of years, we had a banking partner out in Estonia or somewhere like that. Now things are a little bit better. Banks are a bit more Bitcoin friendly. I wouldn't say we're best friends or anything, but they're certainly make it a little bit easier now. From the regulatory side as well, I mean, it's not my area of expertise, but I know over the course of the last decade, there's just been back and forth with regulations. And then from the marketing side, when I first joined, we kind of had a lot more freedom as to what you can and can't say, because Bitcoin wasn't really classified as anything. But in the last couple of years, where we've had the UK FCA categorize it, you now have all the financial promotion stuff, which things you can do, things you can't do. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think that people need to be aware of what they're investing in, what they're buying, because certainly over the years you have seen people rush in as the price has gone up and not know, they FOMO'd in essentially, and kind of like one of our goals at Coincorner is to make sure that people are fully educated before they actually buy Bitcoin. We know we don't do shit coins, we don't do anything that people are gonna want to FOMO in. Our approach is kind of, please educate yourself first. Like you can see in the corner, like Danny has actually written a book, Bitcoin Explained Like I'm 5, which breaks Bitcoin down into, like you would explain it to a 5-year-old, just so people can go in to this decision knowing as much as they can possibly know.
it's a shame that the powers that be don't have the same approach with other types of costs or investments, or frankly, stuff like gambling. I mean, if an 18-year-old has their first job, has £1,000 in their bank and wants to put it all in the 330 at Chepstow, there's nothing really stopping them doing that.
No
But,
issues.
so it is, I find it interesting, and you've, I guess, been at the kind of cold face of this, but there've been so many things that have been made easier for people who wanted to get into Bitcoin the last 10 years or so. Just the ability and the options you've got to actually buy it and transfer money from a bank account to your own e-bank account, and all these things are so much easier than they would have been 10, certainly, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
It was, you had to be a IT geek to do it, but at the same time, other elements, particularly around marketing and promotions, have gone from being maybe the Wild West. They might have been originally, and now, again, you probably have to maybe be a bit guarded on what you say. But do you think elements of it have gone too far, and that maybe Bitcoin promotion or marketing should be allowed to be slightly more free in what can be said and how things can be supported and promoted?
Yeah, I think Bitcoin marketing is probably a little too harsh, but I also feel that with anything like this, you kind of have to swing one way pretty hard to then kind of come back and meet in the middle somewhere. I don't think it doesn't make sense to me, like you said, that people can go and drop 10K on a gambling site or, on stocks and shares platforms, but you can't do that with Bitcoin. I guess time will tell. We work alongside, we work with the sort of regulators in the UK to kind of champion for easier, not easier, but more of a fairer approach.
Yeah, a more appropriate, consistent
Yeah.
approach with other investment types. Because again, on any, if you were to plot Bitcoin investing over a 10-year time horizon
Mm,
against any other asset, it's going to come out on top, isn't it?
yeah. Yeah.
It's just, it's the FCA protecting quote unquote people from the volatility and from their own bad actions, if you like. So
Yeah.
like you say, if someone were to have put their life savings into Bitcoin on the 5th of October last year,
Mm,
within the space of 2 or 3 months, they've lost 50% of their fiat net worth, let's call it that. So it takes a pretty strong-willed person to ride that out and think, well, that's fine, I've still got my conviction, especially
yeah.
if they actually have conviction in the first place. So if they just
Well,
put
that.
it all in, which is comes back to your point around the education and making sure people know what they're doing, which I don't think in any other industry,
Mm,
I don't think that happens to anywhere near to the same extent. Obviously, gambling firms wouldn't do that. Even the likes of Hargreaves Lansdown or AJ Bell,
mm,
if someone tops up their ISA for 20 grand, they're not really saying, well, maybe you should DCA, or maybe you should not just put it all in this, Nvidia stock, because it's gone up quite a lot, it might crash. So I think it is not quite a level playing field, is it?
no, not yet. But I think also, in the grand scheme of things, Bitcoin and the Bitcoin industry is still, I guess, we can consider it still quite a young industry. I mean, I know, if you've been, if you've been in it, it does feel like a lifetime. But when you look at it in the grand scheme of things, I mean, what is 15, 18 years? I can't remember. Um, that's not a long time, and it's certainly not a long time when you think of the amount of retail that are now in. The first, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years were relatively quiet. It was kind of like your nerds and your cypherpunks or whatever you want to call them. But now the retail market is kind of making its appearance and kind of coming in. It's still very, very early days.
Yeah, it's crazy that
Mm,
11 years later, we're still saying we're so early.
yeah.
I wonder at what point Bitcoiners will start saying, maybe we're not that early anymore. Maybe people have arrived now.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I do still think we're early. And I know I've seen a lot of other people say the same. I don't know at what point that'll change. It might just be a feeling, you know, even with the institutions coming in, the governments, everything like that, it still feels early. And I wonder if that's because, like, I went to a radio station here on the Isle of Man the other day, and the woman who was interviewing me was asking, it was for something else, but the woman who was interviewing me was asking what I do as like my full-time job. And I said, oh, I work for Coincorner. And, said it's Bitcoin. And these days I kind of, I mean, I don't know if you're the same, you kind of go through a phase when you first get into Bitcoin that you kind of want to explain it to everybody. Whereas now I just say, yeah, I work for Coincorner, it's Bitcoin. And then if they have questions, great. If they don't, then, it's not the end of the world. But yeah, I mean, she said to me, she's like, oh, my boyfriend's really into it. And, I've been I try and understand it and I just can't get my head around it. I'm like, what? It still amazes me, I think, when I hear people talk about Bitcoin like that, because I spend all day around people. We live, we breathe, we work it. And then when you go outside, when you leave the office at the end of the day, you realize that 90% of people still don't know that you can only buy a fraction of a Bitcoin, or they'll still think you have to buy a full Bitcoin. So yeah, we are still early. There's so much education that still needs to be done. So yeah, we're just chipping away at it slowly.
Yeah, I think it's more fundamental than that as well. I think until the general public understand what fiat money is,
Mm,
because it's almost like the system that's already in place doesn't ever really get questioned by the general population,
yeah.
whereas something new that comes along has to tick so many boxes to even be considered legitimate.
Mm,
But if people actually understood and educated themselves on what fiat money is and what supports it and what doesn't, and money printing and all of the stuff, that the rabbit hole that we go down as Bitcoiners. Once you go down that, Bitcoin is a much easier protocol to understand. But just
yeah.
to dive into Bitcoin, still with a not really any idea of what the pound is so jarring. I think until people start to say, well, how come this country is in so much debt and it doesn't seem to be paying it off, and it keeps going up and getting worse, and all our taxes keep going up, and you
Yeah.
know more and more people will start to question that and
Mm.
understand what's going on there, and it's then a much easier route, I think, into Bitcoin.
Yeah, I mean, I think the last, you know, recently is different, but I think 10 years ago, 5 years ago, the UK and the US are first world countries. We have financial privilege. We can open bank accounts. Our money is not necessarily controlled like other nations. So I think that's why the UK, the US not so much. They seem to be a bit more progressive at the moment, but that's why countries like the UK are behind in embracing Bitcoin because, apart from an investment point of view, there's not a reason to, it's not like El Salvador where Bitcoin is there because they can't get bank accounts, and other countries around the world. So yeah, I think until there becomes a reason, unfortunately, why people, certainly in first world countries, need Bitcoin, that's going to be the problem. People can't understand it because they don't need it.
Yeah, and realistically and kind of sadly, elsewhere in the world, the people that need it might find it, but they don't have the um, financial resources to maybe
Yeah.
uh, you know, get involved as much. Whereas, of course, all it takes is, I don't know, one multi-millionaire in America to allocate 1% of their portfolio because they think maybe there is something in this Bitcoin thing, whereas for that one person there, in terms of the financial contribution, you'd need, thousands and thousands of people
Mm.
elsewhere in the world. But the network is still growing, and
Absolutely. Yeah.
you know, you look at other measures like hash rate,
Hmm.
and network adoption, but I guess another interesting thread maybe to pull on is how much um, the both the Bitcoin space narrative, as well as definitely the mainstream media narrative, the focus is purely on the fiat price of Bitcoin versus, you know,
Yeah.
everything else that Bitcoin is and that Bitcoin is becoming and that Bitcoin is developing to be. But
Mm.
the whole, Bitcoin's dead is all because it's going to go to zero because it's gone from 127 to 60.
Yeah.
Suddenly all the FT articles come out, but, that is purely just fiat price equivalent
Yeah.
of what the Bitcoin is.
Yeah. I mean, we've seen it so much over the years. The amount of Bitcoin, the amount of times Bitcoin has died. I think there's a website called Is Bitcoin Dead, or Bitcoin Obituaries, something like that.
Yeah,
And it,
yeah, yeah.
it basically logs all the times that mainstream media have reported Bitcoin as being dead. And I mean, we're into the hundreds. We're into the hundreds of news articles reporting that Bitcoin is dead, but here we are. Bitcoin is $67,000. That doesn't sound dead to me.
Yeah, yeah,
The mainstream media are really kind of one of my biggest bugbears. Over the years, you see you see them report on either price and the hype, or price and the sort of perceived crash that they think. They never really want to know, about the real things that are happening behind the Bitcoin network. And I get it. Mainstream media these days is very much built on clickbait titles and, what's going to get the engagement. And, if the FT or Daily Mail or one of these mainstream outlets was to put an article about, I don't know, Lightning Network growth or something like that, it's just not going to get the engagement, because people don't, you know, you're appealing to your everyday people, and they're not going to know what the Lightning Network is, because that in itself is a level on top of Bitcoin. But if you put Bitcoin crashed, whatever, Bitcoin's up, they're going to have heard of Bitcoin, and then they're gonna read that. And I think unfortunately that kind of feeds into the misconceptions around Bitcoin, and probably is still a barrier of entry, because if that's what your everyday people are reading, that Bitcoin's dead or Bitcoin's crashed, or it's too late, you've missed out on Bitcoin type thing, that's going to be their perception, because it's kind of filtering down through society to them that way. And that's what they're going to think is the reality. That's going to be their misconception of Bitcoin, unfortunately. So that in itself, I think the mainstream media is doing more damage with stuff like that than we'd like. But unfortunately, there's nothing really you can really do about it. So until their kind of attitude changes, which, we do try, certainly my role at Coincorner, I do talk with journalists very regularly on the weekly. I provide comments for them for stuff that's happening in Bitcoin, but it's always the price that they want to know. What's happening with the price? Why is it doing this? Why is it doing that? We do provide commentary on other things around Bitcoin, but unfortunately that doesn't really get picked up as well as much as we'd hope. So until that changes, I think, yeah, that's going to contribute towards the barrier of entry to the everyday people on Bitcoin.
And do you think most of that narrative is coming just from the individual journalists involved, or do you believe there's some kind of let's put our Bitcoin tinfoil hats on for a second and say there's some kind of government stroke banking stroke whatever
Mm.
conspiracy theory that says they're just trying to kill Bitcoin because they know what a threat it is to the current system. So do you think there's anything in that, or do you think it is just purely that these financial journalists just haven't really, on the whole, haven't really invested any time in finding out what it really is?
Yeah, I do think the latter. I don't necessarily think there's a government conspiracy behind it. Everybody knows that different media outlets are biased one way, biased the other way. There are Bitcoin, more Bitcoin friendly journalists out there. There are, if you look at the spectrum, you've got some that are on the far end of the spectrum that hate Bitcoin, and then you have some that are actually pro Bitcoin, which is nice, and they all write for these different media outlets. But I don't think there's a conspiracy theory. I just think that, yeah, they just haven't taken the time to educate themselves. And I know that that's not necessarily the fault of the journalist. I think that probably the media outlets in which they work for, you know, will be like, cover Bitcoin, cover the Bitcoin price. It's volatile this week or whatever. But it's not like, but it's kind of like a quick story. Get it done, get it published. Don't put too much time into it. I think unless the journalists themselves, when they're writing these articles, actually think, you know what, Bitcoin is interesting, I kind of want to learn more, and they go off and do their own personal research, I think that's the only way their perceptions can change. But then also, if they're writing for a publication that is typically anti-Bitcoin, then, that's going to hinder their career if they then have opposing views, and if they're actually like, I've I've learned about Bitcoin, I understand it, and I believe the opposite. So it's I imagine it's tough, but honestly, I just think everything kind of boils down to a lack of education. But you can't force people to learn. They've got to figure it out themselves.
Yeah. And also, back to your point as well, America and the UK,
Mm,
we're reasonably affluent nations that certainly the individuals in it anyway, and a lot benefit from the current system one way or another. So there's not necessarily the need to understand Bitcoin as much as there are in other countries. So again, until such time that people start feeling the pinch a lot harder, whether you know the tax rates keep going up, cost
mm,
of living, inflation, and suddenly people are thinking we can't live now. We keep getting pay rises, but we keep getting poorer. What's going on?
yeah. I think, people are starting to slowly realize that in the UK, certainly over the last year or two, people are questioning what's going on. The challenge that you have then is then getting people to, the little income that they do have left to put it into Bitcoin. Because, if you are financially struggling, your priorities are going to be your food, your water, your roof over your head. I think that, a big problem, I don't know, you've probably had guests talk about it before, but a big problem is the fact that, throughout your life, you're not educated on investing, you're not educated on money. It's not part of the UK school curriculum. I came out of school and when we bought our first house, I couldn't get my head around what a mortgage was. And it's just like you're just not educated to that sort of thing. I think maybe if things were different and you were educated at school about investments and how to put your money to use and those sorts of things, then people would be in a lot better position. Certainly, sort of the way the world is now.
I did accounting and finance degree.
Mm,
I did maths and economics at A level. I then became a chartered management accountant, but
mm.
I only learned really, honestly, I only really learned what money was like 4 or 5 years ago. So,
Yeah, it's mad.
and it's mental. I remember talking to Joe Bryan, who was in investment banking, and he's like, "Well,
Mm,
he didn't know what money was." We're all kind of in our world. We've grown up with this thing,
yeah.
and it's like I sort of liken it to air or water. It's like
Mm,
it's money. This £10 note. But but like you never have to stop to really think what it is.
no.
It's there, and it's always been there, and it's just part of our lives. But yeah, until people start to really, explore what that is and where it's come from and what it used to be, and the fact that it's not been around forever,
Mm,
and every other currency that's ever been before has failed at some point.
yeah.
But like no one, not no one, there are very few people you would talk to outside of Bitcoin that would not think you are completely off your trolley if
Hmm.
you suggested that at some point in the future, don't quite know when, but at some point in the future, this £10 note thing that you're holding will effectively be worthless. It won't
Yeah.
mean anything. I mean, it doesn't really represent anything right now, but at some point in the future, you won't be able to take that and exchange it for something.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's mad. Like I have friends that actually, they work in banks, and even though they are working in the banks, they don't understand money. They don't. They just turn up, they do their job, but they do not understand. They just don't understand money, and that's kind of crazy to me.
Mm. And I think the other elements you say, like, what's a mortgage? What is saving?
Mm,
What is investing? What are the risks? What are the risks of not investing versus the risks of investing and what you're deciding to invest in? Compound interest, all of that kind of
mm,
stuff. Which again, I think I don't know. I don't know why schools wouldn't want to try and teach kids what it is, because so much of it. I know I'm an accountant and all the rest of it, so I realize I kind of sound a bit stupid saying it's not that difficult, but I genuinely believe you can get relatable, simple examples to even show to quite young children what
yeah.
if you save it and then you get a little bit extra for
Mm,
tucking it away, it doesn't have to be really complicated. But
yeah.
so many people get into adulthood you know and later into their 30s, 40s, 50s, still just kind of just doing what people tell them to do without really understanding anything about any of it.
Yeah. It's quite interesting, actually. Being on the Isle of Man, we are quite a small local community. So we have done a couple of talks to school children. We had a group of, I want to say, year sixes visit the offices last year, and we did a talk to them, kind of explaining what Bitcoin is. But again, it's like explain like I'm 5 type thing, or however they're all 10.
Yeah.
And if you do explain it in a simple enough way, I mean, we talked to them about sort of like the progression of money, how it used to be shells that people traded, and then it became, cattle, and then it became your gold, and then it became the actual coins, and now, potentially in the future it could be Bitcoin. And that progression they can understand. And, even things, I mean, a silly one, but even likening Bitcoin to things like not Zuckbuck, is it Zuckbucks? Or, in-game currencies, Roblox and
Robux, all that
Robux.
kind of stuff. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's kind of relating to them on their level, because that's digital currency to them. I mean, my son is 8 and obsessed with Roblox and always wants Robux.
My son is 10 and he's exactly the same. We'll have to get them to connect. At least it'll be two Bitcoiners playing with each other.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the thing as well, because my son has been around me. I had him while I was here at Coincorner, so Bitcoin is
Yeah,
kind of in his world.
yeah,
He
yeah.
he knows.
Does he get pocket money in Bitcoin or fiat, or does he have a choice? That's a
He,
serious question.
yeah, no, well, all his pocket money goes straight into Robux, so it starts
Wow.
off. Yeah, I know. He's obsessed. But yeah, no, he's grown up around it, and even if he sees the Bitcoin logo on TV, he knows it and he'll point it out to me. And that's not like, I feel like I'm doing a good job, because just for him to have that sort of association. And he was at school a couple of months ago, and he said that he actually saw one of the older kids in year 6 like wearing a pair of our socks, and he went up to them and said, "My mum works there." And just that recognition that he's kind of putting it all together in his mind. He may not be able to you know compre- uh, comprehend or speak fluently about Bitcoin, but it is all going in. And I think that's just what we need to do with sort of like the up and coming generation. We call them Generation B, the next generation of Bitcoiners, because they're going to get it. They're going to understand digital currency. They're going to understand that it's not. It may not be a physical thing. You won't have coins. You won't have, notes. You
Well,
know,
more and more we aren't with the pound, are we? Anyway, I mean,
no, exactly.
there are places that don't even accept cash now.
Hmm.
There are, so that it's not a again, I guess over time it's less of a leap for people,
Yeah.
because the whole argument, that people used to say, well, you can't touch it and feel it. Well,
Hmm.
I know you still can touch and feel a pound coin or a £10 note, but most people don't. Most people just tap.
Yeah.
It's all
Tap and pay.
digital, so all these things become lower hurdle rates to get people over the line, don't they?
Yeah,
Is it worth
absolutely.
touching on Mount socks? Because I can see, for anyone watching and not listening, there's a nice little array of brightly coloured Bitcoin socks behind you on the shelf.
Yeah, absolutely. So Mount Socks is, for anyone that doesn't know, is a collection of Bitcoin themed socks produced by Coincorner. We actually, when was it? I think it was 2018. We started making them, and sort of like, again, it kind of feeds into our educational angle. Was that we wanted a fun, tangible way to educate people about Bitcoin. Because Coincorner is a service. It's not, there's no physical product to it. So yeah, we kind of came up with the concept of socks. We wanted something that everybody could wear. I think at the time Samson Mao was doing caps, so that was kind of not an option. But yeah, we wanted something that people could wear but not necessarily have to show. So like
Mm.
if you are a Bitcoiner who's working in a bank, you can wear Bitcoin socks, but people are not going to know because they're going to be hidden under your trousers. And yeah, the concept of Mount Socks was that we each design um, attributes to sort of like either a meme or a historic event or just general information about Bitcoin, but kind of like in a fun way, so that you know you can go and read online about the Lightning Network, or what a Bitcoin whale is, or cold storage. but it's kind of dull and kind of boring. So with the socks, for anyone that can see, we've got cold storage, we've got the Bitcoin Bull, we've got, that might be another cold storage, different design. We've got Rocket to the Moon. For the top, I've got Roller Coaster Guy and Bitcoin Whale, and there's a Lightning Network there. So each pair of socks comes with a sort of like a little card that kind of explains what it is. You know, if it's Roller Coaster Guide, the sort of symbolism behind that, where the meme came from, why it's still relevant. And yeah, they've been great. We use them for so many things. Conferences, they always go down great at conferences. And they're kind of nice because they're bright and they're colourful and memorable. So yeah, Mount Socks has been it's been great. It was originally created as a marketing concept for Coincorner, but it's probably been our best marketing concept ever.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah, you
Yeah.
kindly gave us some for the conference Jason and I did back in September last year, and
Yeah,
we put them in little goodie bags. They always go down well.
they do, don't they?
Do you keep kind of refreshing and adding new designs, or do you kind of a staple collection that you just keep making, or how does
Yeah.
that work?
So we have the original collection, and then a year or two ago we brought out what we call Bitcoin Island collection, because people kept calling the Isle of Man Bitcoin Island. So we kind of revamped some of the original ones, modernized them, and kind of made them a bit more like a slight Bitcoin Island theme to them. So at the moment we have the two collections. But yeah, I mean we're always open to doing new designs and things like that. It's just the time and the resource. Yeah.
And is that a kind of partly as well helps you get around some of the restrictions, the legislative restrictions that you have, that you can't necessarily give money to support events, but you can
Yes.
you can give
We can give product, yeah.
you can give product, yeah.
Yeah.
Because it
Yeah.
is, again, from our experience of trying to reach out to sponsors for events and stuff, it's still so difficult because there's just so many restrictions about, but free socks are still great.
Yeah, I mean, it's really tricky because, you know, over the years, a lot of our marketing focus has been on sort of like the community and the grassroots. You know, starting at the bottom, we used to, you know, we still do to some degree, sponsor a lot of the meetups in the UK. We provide support, all sorts of resources. We have sometimes the team go along, you know, to ask questions and stuff like that, to answer questions. But yeah, I mean, sort of like the financial promotions stuff has made that more difficult, which then obviously it kind of it starts to begin to suffocate the UK Bitcoin scene, because you know, if we can't provide sponsorship for those things, then you know it's not the end of the world, but it, you know, buying a round of drinks for a Bitcoin meetup is, it's not going to break our bank, and it's also it's a nice thing to do. But if the, you know, if there's kind of seen as sponsorship or anything like that, that can be sort of like red flagged. So I'm kind of hoping that, you know, if the marketing side, regulatory side is going to change, it's going to change soon, because you don't want to lose that. You want to encourage the people that are on the ground. I mean, there's like, I've got a spreadsheet somewhere of them, but it's like 60 odd meetups in the UK, in, you know, all throughout the UK from the top to the very bottom. And it's great. You want to support that. You want to encourage that, because that, the people that are hosting the meetups are helping me, helping Coincorner, helping the whole industry, because they're the ones that are getting new people into Bitcoin, putting the time and effort. You know, they're not getting paid for that. So yeah, I'm a big fan of the sort of like the grassroots style stuff. I just really hope that that does not get impacted as a result of the bigger regulatory issues.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we're doing Pizza Day in Bury St Edmunds this year. Freddie's going to come along, and
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure on the last podcast, was it you and Danny even said you might head over to Suffolk. I don't know if that was just for the podcast, or whether actually that might be something you might consider doing.
No, it was me and Dave, because me and Dave went
right,
we went to Derby back in November for the Bitcoin
Yes.
Collective conference. We had a good time. But yeah, no, I have looked at it. It's just getting from the Isle of Man to Gatwick. You can fly from the Isle of Man to Gatwick, that's fine. But then getting from Gatwick to Bury St Edmunds is a bit of a
Is that the
ball
only
ache.
flight? Is that the only flight they do? Get Isle of Man to Gatwick? Is there no other?
No, they do other flights. You can fly Isle of Man to Liverpool or Isle of Man to Manchester. But yeah,
But
Gatwick is the only London one.
wow.
Yeah.
I'm quite surprised by that.
Yeah, there might be a Heathrow one, but that's quite the Gatwick one is almost daily, sometimes twice daily. The Heathrow
Yeah.
one is a bit more sporadic throughout the week. So, yeah, joys of living on an island.
Well, yeah, maybe we should collaborate, and me and Jace can try and do a Bitcoin meet, a big, I don't know, a conference in the Isle of Man. That'd be quite cool.
Yeah, that would
Although,
be cool. You have to get everybody over here.
yeah, I love the idea. I was chatting to a guy who lives up in the Lake District and said, like, you
Mm,
should do a conference, a camping conference. I think there's one in Wales they do every year,
yes.
sort of camping focused one. That'd probably be quite cool in the Isle of Man, wouldn't it? To
Yeah.
get everyone come over and pitch up some tents, and yeah, that'd be
Yeah.
good.
The only risk you've got is the weather, so it's very unpredictable.
Yeah, well, that's the UK in general, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, the other thing I wanted to talk to you about, Molly, is obviously you've been around in marketing all your career,
Mhm.
but in terms of in Bitcoin for the last 10, 11 years, it's quite a male dominated industry. Well, at
Mhm.
least that's my perception anyway, from the outside ish looking in. So it'd be interesting to hear your views as a kind of key woman in Bitcoin, as it were, just what your experiences, good, bad, indifferent, have been over the last kind of 10, 11 years. I went to Bitcoin Prague 2025 and I absolutely loved it. It's back again. If you're looking at going, use code GaryBTC at checkout for 10% off your tickets.
Yeah. Honestly, it's been fine. I've never had any issue working in this industry. It's nice sort of over the years to see the women in Bitcoin side grow, but I think that, you know, it's not it's not a problem. It's always nice to see representations of any gender or culture or religion or whatever race increase in it in any industry. It is nice sometimes to have a little bit more female energy in this industry because it can be a bit alpha sometimes. It's true. I mean, even here at Coincorner, I would say that quick math off the top of my head, maybe 80% of our staff are male, but that's not because for any reason other than the fact that when applying for a role in this sort of industry, you do get more men. And it's the same if you look at CoinCorner's customer base, it'll be the same 80% are male because it's just males with that interest. So I think to be either a woman in, investing in Bitcoin or a woman working in Bitcoin, they're always going to be the minority because, well, hopefully not forever, but certainly for the foreseeable, because it's the same with all those sorts of industries. Stocks and shares industries, I would imagine, are predominantly men as well. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I've never felt alienated or, can't think of the word, but, I've never felt put out just because I'm a woman in this industry. And at the end of the day, yeah, everybody's been incredibly welcoming. I've never had any issues over the years. So it's nice to see. I think there's a Woman in Bitcoin conference coming up. I can't remember the date, but that in itself has got a whole host of women that are involved and doing great things. And I just think that gender shouldn't really matter, as long as everybody's kind of working towards the same goal and doing what's best for Bitcoin.
Yeah, it's really great to hear you saying that, and it certainly feels that you meant exactly what you said. You weren't just kind of saying what you thought you had to say. But I think a few of the observations I've had in the last
Mm,
sort of year or two, like when I went to the Prague conference last year, there's families there. There's the mix of young and old, and
mm,
Bitcoin. I think to some extent, Bitcoin is for everyone. Yeah, again, that's a kind of meme in Bitcoin. Bitcoin's for
yeah,
everyone. Bitcoin's for your enemies. So I think that helps to just make it it makes it a welcoming space for everyone, the young, the old, the male, female. Basically, if your heart's in the right place and you're trying to achieve something in Bitcoin, Bitcoiners will embrace you regardless. I mean,
yeah,
at our conference, we had a really good mix of I think about 30% of our speakers were female,
mm,
is I think if you compared that to any other conference, I think we'd be well up on that.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
we had some, our youngest speaker, Sam Dewal, is 14, and she was one of the most articulate amazing speakers on the day. And
Yeah.
it's like, and lots of people said that. And you imagine that was a TradFi conference
Mhm.
and, talking about, I don't know, some wanky foreign exchange derivative or something. And
Yeah.
you had some teenage, teenager on the stage trying to talk about it, they'd
Mm.
literally get laughed off, I think.
Yeah,
If
absolutely.
you weren't a man in a suit or a woman power dressing, then
Yeah.
what the hell are you doing here? So
Yeah.
I think that's really encouraging, and I think it's great for my kids as they grow older. Whatever the Bitcoin employment situation becomes, we have to hope and believe it will become a bigger thing, because at the moment it's really hard to actually work in Bitcoin.
Mm.
But that can only be a good thing, in my opinion. Is it feels like it will be embracing to everyone, regardless of anything, regardless of your background, of your views, of the thing that unifies it all is Bitcoin.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, in order for Bitcoin to be a success, you cannot refuse entry for people because, if you're going to limit who can be a part of it, then it's never going to reach its full potential. So I think that as long as everybody's working towards the same vision, then everybody is welcome in Bitcoin as far as I'm concerned.
So looking forward to the next, I don't know, 6, 12, 18 months, you're probably better placed than many to have a view of what might be coming up around the corner. I'm not talking about price, by the way. You can talk about price if you want, but I'm not talking about price. I know Coincorner recently did Bitcoin-backed loans.
Hmm.
There's obviously the B-HODL side of things as well. Again, I'm sure there'll be lots of stuff that you probably know that you can't say or you can't share. But what's your take on what exciting things might be coming for the UK and maybe further afield in the next couple of years?
Well, I mean, obviously, price, no one knows what's going to happen. So you can't really comment on that anyway. But in terms of the UK, I'd like to hope that their position will change, certainly in the next 12 to 18 months, 24 months. They've got to, I feel like, I mean, we've just seen Gemini announce that they're leaving the UK. Stuff like that has got to have the UK, the FCA, wake up and think, we do not want to be left behind. So it's not that it's not that I'm envisioning, I know that's going to happen. It's more of like, I would hope that certainly in the next 12, 18, 24 months that the UK does take a step back and look at the bigger picture and go, we're going to lose, this industry if we don't change sort of like our stance on it. There's not too much I can talk about from the Coin Corner or the B-HODL side, but, you know, this next year and a half are definitely exciting for us. I think just the industry in a whole, it's constantly changing, constantly developing, and we have to obviously be flexible in what we do in order to keep up with sort of like the demands from the industry. I mean, yeah, you mentioned Bitcoin backed loans. That's something that has kind of come about fairly recently, maybe in the last year or so that people have, or a little bit longer. But that's a product that 5 years ago people didn't really, it wasn't on people's radars. So that's a product that we've had to then build as a result of demand, and we don't know in the next year, 2 years, what's going to be the next thing that people want. Yeah, I just think that working in Bitcoin is very exciting. It's constantly changing. I mean, I know some people don't like that. Some people like a job with stability and predictability, and they know, you know, I mean, in my job that I had before I joined Coin Corner, the hospitality industry, I could plan marketing like for the entire year. I would sit there in January and plan for the whole year because you knew what was happening, when it was happening, all the big days. But certainly working in this industry has meant that I've had to become more reactive, shall we say, to the way things are. And you just can't, you can plan 3, 6 months ahead, but things change so fast. You've got such clever, incredible people working on Bitcoin, working on the Lightning Network, working on a whole host of Bitcoin related features that I just think it's a very exciting time. And I think these next 2 years are just going to be just as exciting as they have been the last 10, 11 years that I've been in it.
Yeah. So you think the FT might be wrong there? Maybe Bitcoin isn't dead after all.
I have an inkling that Bitcoin might not be
Yeah.
dead, but yeah,
Yeah.
I mean that won't be the last article they put out that says Bitcoin's dead.
No, no. But And Bitcoin is almost certainly to outlive the FT, which would be, wouldn't that be a beautiful day when the FT finally stops publication because for whatever reason, while Bitcoin is at $10 million a coin or whatever it may be at that point.
Yeah, that
But
will
yeah,
be a beautiful day. Yeah.
yeah. Maybe by then, though, they might start saying, maybe you should just buy a little bit in case it catches on.
Yeah.
You never know. You never know.
At that point, I feel like by then we won't be saying it's still early. I think by the time the FT probably come round, we'll be saying, yeah, that time's gone.
It's time. Yeah. But it's funny. I know I'm going back to that conversation again, but still, when you think of how quickly things change and how much things have moved on, like in America, talking about a potential strategic Bitcoin reserve, and there's so many things, and a number of businesses that are putting Bitcoin on their balance sheets, and the kind of rumors and suspicions that there are other nation states that are probably, we know Bhutan is mining Bitcoin, the likelihood China and Russia are, and you kind of think it's still so many people are just unaware of all this bigger picture stuff that's going on. But yeah, it's good. It's good. It's still, as you say, it just shows how early we still are.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Right. Well, the last question I ask all my guests, Molly, is what's one belief you held before Bitcoin that you've completely changed your mind about?
Wow, that's a really great question. I guess it was kind of like to my point earlier that you just don't understand money until you get into Bitcoin. I think the sort of like the belief that the financial system is there to work in your favor and that, you trust the government. I think all of that side that you just kind of go along in your life, like you say, a £10 worth £10, it's all good. Like you just kind of go along in an oblivious state. That's kind of the belief I think I had until I started working in Bitcoin. And now, like my whole perception has changed. I feel like I had to unlearn what I knew about money or what I thought I knew about money and relearn. And yeah, it's been quite an eye opener these last decade.
Definitely. Yeah.
Oh,
Imagine if you'd stayed in hospitality, I think you're trodden quite a different path, I suspect.
I know. And I mean, I often think about it. I just think how different my life would be if I hadn't have started working, in Bitcoin. And yeah, I would just be sort of like the 90% of people that, well, 99% of people even that just are going through life not fully understanding the bigger picture.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I probably should have asked you about half an hour ago. But do you think you would have stumbled across Bitcoin or been open to it, or do you because of the sort of person you are, and like you said, your
Mm,
first story, saving that money for your mini? Do you
yeah.
think you may have come across it, or do you think like you probably wouldn't have done had you not
Mm.
started working for Coincorner?
Yeah, I actually don't think I would have done. I think, like we touched on sort of like the lack of education around money as a kid and throughout school. I just don't, I just think I would have probably gone on throughout my life with that sort of mentality. You work, you get your salary, you pay your taxes, you mortgaged up to your eyeballs, because that's also what everybody else is doing. You so what I can't remember what the quote is off the top of my head about being surrounded by people of the same mindset. But you know, the longer I've worked at Coincorner, the bigger the team has grown. If you can kind of call it maxi or not, I don't know, but that in itself has encouraged me to learn more because you're having these conversations every day. Um, with a team of 30 odd people now, these are conversations that we're having, just in the kitchen over a cup of tea, like when we're waiting for the kettle in the morning. Those are not conversations that you would have outside necessarily of this environment. So yeah, I honestly think that if I hadn't have started working at Coin Corner, I would probably just be as oblivious as everybody else.
Okay, well, thanks so much for coming on as a guest, Molly. Where's the best place people could find you if they want to reach out?
Probably Twitter. I'm on Twitter quite a lot under the handle Coin Corner Molly. I'm also on Telegram as well. I know a lot of the Telegram groups, same handle as well. But yeah, those are the two places you can find me.
And the Bitcoiner podcast, of course.
And the Bitcoiner podcast, yeah. Sure.
Great. Well, thanks so much for being on, Molly. Hopefully, if you can find some logistics to get from Gatwick to Suffolk, maybe we'll see you in May. If not, hopefully some other point in time.
Yeah, that would be great.
Great. Thanks.
Thank you.